You're watching Newzroom Afrika. Let's get into this discussion now. After nearly 5 years without a proper leadership structure, the ANC in the Western Cape expected to install new leaders ahead of the crucial 2024 elections. The three-horse race includes Member of Parliament Qubudile Dyantyi, Member of the Provincial Legislature and ANC Veteran Cameron Dugmore, and former Western Cape Youth League chairperson Justin de Allende. But what qualities do the contenders think will help the ANC win back this province, which it lost to the Democratic Alliance back in 2009? Joining us now is ANC veteran Cameron Dugmore to speak to us about his leadership ambitions. And Mr. Dugmore, thank you very much for your time. As mentioned in that introduction, you are an ANC veteran, which basically means you have seen it all, and some people will suggest perhaps your energies would be better used giving or imparting wisdom from the sidelines to those who are obviously putting themselves up for leadership positions. But here you are, wanting to get your hands dirty in leadership contests. What made you say yes to being nominated for this position?
Thanks very much, Collie. Basically, the decision to elect a chairperson or any other position in the ANC lies with the branches and the voting delegates. And you might recall that around 2017, 2018, the former chairperson, Marius Fransman, stepped down. There was a vacancy. And at that stage already, I had been approached by members, comrades of the ANC, to make myself available to fill that vacancy of chairperson back in 2018. That PGC never happened. As you know, the IPC was appointed, and now finally we're having a conference. And pretty much the same group of branches, comrades from different structures came to me and said they believe that I would be a good person to lead the ANC in the province. And therefore I accepted the nomination. But I must just correct one thing. You know that there's quite a technical definition of what a veteran is. It's like 40 years. And, so I'm not a member of the Veterans League. I'm a member of my ANC branch, the Gaby Shapiro branch. But I'm definitely not actually in the veteran category. But it's a compliment to describe me as a veteran. But I think probably quite an energetic and youthful veteran at that.
Well, I'm only going to laugh at that because, your history is there for all to read. You have come from the days of the UDF. You were part of the leadership structures of the ANC, I think from about 2005 onwards. You have been there. You've seen it all. So the premise of the question here is that people like you are relied upon for their wisdom. But here we are with a party that wants to renew itself. So if indeed you were to be elected next week, which is when we believe this conference is going to be held, what qualities do you bring, in particular at a time when the ANC, it's in the doldrums?
Yeah. Well, just to say that, this is the first time I've been approached to stand for a position in leadership such as the chair. Previously I've served on as an additional member and so on. But those that approached me, and actually we have a campaign team chaired by Dr. Zola Mbovane, and their motivation was basically that we need someone with integrity, someone who has respect in the Western Cape across different communities, someone who's had a track record both in government. You might recall I was MEC for Education and Cultural Affairs and Sport for a while, and yes, has served over the while. So, as you've said, Oli, the issue is we've slumped from a high of 46% in 2004 when we then governed in a coalition with what was then called the New National Party, literally down to 27% in 2019. And those that have approached me have said that together with a collective committed to rebuild and unite this ANC in the Western Cape, that we actually can do that with the leadership that I would be able to provide. You would remember we've been heading the by-elections. We've taken by-elections recently from the DA in Barrydale. We've also actually held on to our base areas in the by-election, although the turnout is an issue. So I think we are poised. After 5 years of an interim committee, we now really have an opportunity as the ANC in the Western Cape to begin to turn the wheel in a positive direction.
Yeah.
And I've accepted the challenge to be part of that, and I wouldn't have done so if I didn't think I could be part of a team that will rebuild and renew this province and build our integrity amongst each and every community.
Yeah. Mr. Dugmore, we don't have much time, but I have quite a string of questions for you. I'm going to press
I'll
on.
be quick.
Please do.
I'll be quick.
The ANC lost power to the Democratic Alliance in 2009. For viewers to be taken along, I'd like for you to tell us in your own words, as a party member, why you think the ANC lost power to the DA in 2009 and it has been a struggle for you to regain control of that province.
In my view, the factors relate to deep-seated divisions in the ANC in our province. Factions which become entrenched and permanent. And essentially, when you don't have a united organization committed to, for instance, a program of renewal, and you literally are fighting over positions, fighting over deployments, etc., it's a recipe for disaster and political defeat. So I would say, in summary, deep-seated divisions amongst members and comrades of the ANC, and factionalism which is entrenched.
Has any of that changed? The argument by others is that, well, I mean, you're describing exactly what seems to be problematic about this party right now.
Well, I think what is clear is that as we approach this conference, and I think many others have seen, there's a lot of maturity saying that we need to unite. Whoever is elected, we need to unite behind that leadership. The conference itself must be run in a disciplined, a fair, and a peaceful way. So those are positive signs. But I think the positive signs are that the ANC was the smallest delegation in 2017 to the national conference. This time round, last year, we were bigger than 2 other provinces, which is an indication of the beginnings of a growth in the ANC in the Western Cape. And we are very clear that we have to draw a distinction between a perspective about who you support for leadership and a faction, which literally just continues conference after conference. We've had bizarre situations where some leaders lose a conference and say, we've got 5 years. So it's almost as though that they're going to spend 5 years fighting the elected leadership. That we don't need. And I'm confident that people realize this is a chance that we have, and we have to take it with both hands and build, unite, renew this province, and actually deliver to people, to serve them, which is what the ANC is there for, to serve our people, to build a better life. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the ANC's record in government, and that record is dismal. That's a carefully chosen word. It is dismal because the Western Cape province continues to be the one province that has the majority of municipalities bringing out clean audit reports. That's not me saying that. That's the Auditor General. But here's the difference. It is under a DA-led government. So why should the people of the Western Cape have any faith that the ANC would do any better, given that the provinces that you run, those municipalities, my goodness, the less said, the better.
Yeah. Chloe, I think I would like to just quickly challenge the narrative that everything about ANC government is dismal. Learners have got access to higher education now if their income is less than 350,000. We've seen the delivery in regard to human settlements, land claims, and so on. But the issue is the DA, and it's correct, and we would support the issue of pursuing clean audits. But the reality is that since the DA has been governing since 2009, agricultural land in the Western Cape, only 3% of black, African, colored, and Indian people own agricultural land. 70% of the urban land in this province is owned by South Africans who are classified as white. So you might have a clean audit, but if you have no will to deliver on land redistribution, if you have no will to actually deliver on a minimum wage, which the DA is opposed to, they support 1,800 rand. So those realities of our province, of continued accumulation of wealth by those who've inherited that wealth over many years, the refusal to actually transfer ownership patterns, transform ownership patterns of this economy. If you look at the property sector, you look at the agriculture, you look at every sector, the issue of broad-based ownership, the simple issue of access to land. So as many clean audits as you have, people in this province are suffering, especially the poor, the non-metro and the metro areas, the working class communities. And you would remember that when the ANC governed this province, the unemployment rate was also the best in the country because the Western Cape has an inherited infrastructure which many other provinces don't have. But the DA governs for the few. We will govern for the many. We will actually govern to transform the lives, of those who really need it. And that's the difference between the ANC and the DA.
Well, let's try and tackle some of what you are running on in terms of your campaign to want to be chairperson of the ANC in the Western Cape. You are saying that the ANC in that province must renew its fight against drugs, gangs, and violence. Now, the Democratic Alliance seems to want to have a police force that is detached from the national structure of the South African police services, and they're saying that if that were to happen, perhaps they would deal decisively with all of this stuff that I've mentioned to you, the scourge of drug abuse there and violence. What's your solution to the problem?
Chloe, I think one of the challenges, crime should be an issue that everyone takes on. But given its a massive effect on the lives of people, the ability just to simply go out to be safe. But once you start a conflict, once you start a fight with national government about crime, which is essentially, you remember the days of Helen Ziller, blame and complain, and don't actually deal with the problem. So what has been happening is that this parallel Western Cape, in terms of the law enforcement, is actually creating division. For instance, the community police fora are a legislative part of the fight against crime, but the DA is totally not funding them. They are only funding certain neighborhood watches. So when you start creating divisions amongst those who are actually wanting to help government fight crime, you've got a serious problem. And also we've had serious issues where the city of Cape Town itself, run by the DA, has been directly supporting procurement of housing opportunities to criminal and gang syndicates in this province without actually being willing to expose those links. We've argued we need to come with street committees. We need to support those to begin to deal with extortion, which is happening in many, many of our communities. But all the DA does is talk about we want our own law enforcement. We will fund the neighborhood watch, not the community. So the division. So the first issue, don't politicize the fight against crime. Realize that we need the city, the province, and national, and we need our communities. And because they're not doing that, and especially not dealing with drugs, we have a massive problem in this province, and they are not dealing with that in terms of providing alternatives to youth. And the two Cape Towns.
Those street committees, and I'm sorry to cut in, those street committees, I mean, the ANC has been talking about these at length. I mean, I can remember as far back as when Blaine Nzimande was the chairperson of the South African Communist Party. All I'm trying to say is that I'm not sure that they are producing the results. Anyway, let's end the conversation on another campaign slogan of yours, if you want to call it that. You're saying that the ANC is opposed to all forms of corruption. Now, this is quite a sensitive time for the ANC in the Western Cape in particular to be talking about issues of corruption because a cloud hangs over the head of a fellow contender for this position, Qubudile Dyantyi, and it's got to do with the committee that he is leading or chairing that's looking into the fitness of the Public Protector's Office. Now, the question I want to ask of you in relation to corruption is that do you think the ANC speaks with any measure of credibility when it says it is opposed to all forms of corruption? I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that Mr. Dyantyi is guilty of what he's being accused of. I'm merely saying there's a record of the ANC and corruption, including some comrades of yours that sit in jail today.
Yeah, Colin, first of all, I think it's really not fair based on an unsubstantiated media reports to which Qubudile Dyantyi has already responded, dismissed them as absolute fabrication, to even mention the word of corruption in that regard. I think that's completely unfair. The Qubudile Dyantyi that I know is someone who would definitely not get anywhere near that kind of activity. So he's indicated, let the process go forward. Yeah. But the reality is we do know that across our organization, the private sector, in churches, this pandemic is huge. I think the issue is being consistent. The ANC is the only organization which says that when there's a serious charge against you, you have to step aside. You've seen examples of where the DA simply continue with their councillors who've been charged. That's a huge step that the ANC has taken. We all know that the president has improved the capacity of the National Prosecuting Authority, the SIU, the Hawks. These things take time, but I think it starts with the culture within the organization. I've been in this organization, since 1987, and we've gone through our ups and downs. All I'm saying to Polly is that what I see now from the last conference, from what is happening, is that there's a realization that this corruption is damaging not just the organization but our country. Yeah. And you are seeing the seeds of beginning to deal with it. I challenge other political parties to adopt what the ANC has decided. When a member of yours is charged, let that member step aside. The ANC is beginning to lead the way, and we are clear, without fear or favor. If it's a member, it's not a member, it's a member of another party, the law has to take its course, not in a factional way, but without fear or favor, and that's what we committed to.
Cameron Dugmore, thank you very much for your time. He is a contender for the position of chairperson of the ANC in the Western Cape. Well, here is an open invitation to you, Mr. Dyantyi. You are a contender, fellow contender. Please come, talk to us. Tomorrow is a day, and so does this invitation extend to you, Mr. Justin de Allende.